Welcome to BSc M2206 Health and Safety in Supply Chain, Module 4, Hazard and Risk Management, Part 2. House rules. Attendance list has to be completed. Mobile phone on silent mode. Please pay attention to the discussion only. And if there's any emergencies, if there's any requirement for you to step out, please do so. But ensure that you come back again and pay required attention. And remember, why I am saying is come back is for the reason is if there's any questions to be asked, you have to ask the questions within this program and not afterwards. If you flash your questions within the time frame of this discussion, I'm giving you the answer then and there. If not, there may be kind of a delay. So it is always better to ask the question during the discussion, so you will get the right answer instantly. Then about the risk management modules 4.1, 4.2, 4.3. We have already completed 4.1 during the last week. Now it is 4.2, HEMP, Hazard Effect Management Process. Then it comes 4.3, that Safe System of Work and Emergency Response. But anyway, by the time you complete 4.2, that is HEMP, you have partially completed, I could say easily 60% completed of 4.3 also. Why? As the hazard effect management process part is the safe system, identifying safe system of work and emergency responses. Now, this HEMP is applicable to the risk management at operational level. Last week what we did was the risk management at strategic level, where the management takes a decision to take over or purchase a business. That is a decision to go for the risk or to treat the risk or not to take the risk. So we have made that decision and all our CEOs has agreed to purchase some businesses. Now let's see from today how they are going to manage the risk of the newly purchased business. So hazard effect management process is in general is central to effective implementation of health safety environmental management system. And this process is been developed over so many years to ensure that it evaluates all the potential hazards and their effects in a systematic manner without leaving any space for improper completion. During this process, what we are doing is all the hazards in the business will be identified, assessed, mitigation measures and recovery preparedness measures put in place. So once you complete all these things, when the HEMP is being completed, you can be very sure, if it has been properly done, of course, your business is going to operate safely. Now also remember I told you that when you are completing this 4.2 HEMP module, we are completing about 60% of the safe work procedures and emergency response management. You can see here the recent hazard must be identified, assessed, mitigation and recovery prepared measures put in place. So we are actually completing part of 4.3 also. So remember, once we do the HEMP, we will be reducing all the potential or possible consequences of any of the remaining risk within the business. Now let's see when the HEMP is being used. In generally, HEMP is a tool, HEMP stands for Hazard Effect Management Process, I am repeating again, is a tool for managing all aspects of the business, not only at the time of takeover. Where we can do it? Planning for routine operations. When you are doing a routine maintenance, routine process or anything, you can do a HEMP to identify if there's any risk. Incident investigation to identify whether the risk have been properly controlled or not. Then audit, unsafe fact auditing, hazard spotting, you can use HEMP. And also new customer facility like purchasing auto gas business or something like that, or routine maintenance or engineering work, you can still use a HEMP. And changes to the plant operational procedures or arrangements. Still you can run through this process and identify whether your business is going to have any additional risk and all the risks were properly controlled or not. New products. Now this is actually exactly what we did last week. I wanted you all to get into a new business and start dealing with a new product. Then we have to use the HEMP to identify whether the risk of that business is been properly managed. And before we start, we have to agree and understand What are the hemp terms? There are specific words with specific meanings what we are using during the hemp process. Hazard. Remember, every time if someone says hazard, hazard is the potential to cause harm. To who? People, property, impact on the environment, social disruptions, and impact on the reputation. So remember always, hazard is the potential to cause harm. You will understand this better in a little while. Now you can see here, there's some water lying on the floor. It makes the surface slippery and it has the potential to cause harm. The risk. Risk is the chance that a particular negative effect will happen. Risk is a likelihood of a particular consequence and the severity of the consequence. So that means the potential to cause harm is there. What is the likelihood of getting into that situation? And if you get into the situation, what are the repercussions or the consequences? So that is risk. So risk is likelihood into consequence. Now say as an example, now this water is there. So the potential to cause harm is there. If there's no any board, imagine if this is office environment where about 100 people walks up and down daily basis. Now the risk is out of that 100, how many people will slip? Then the consequence, out of that, how many will get out without any damage? How many will suffer minor injuries? How many will suffer serious injuries? How many will suffer even deaths? Now, for the same example, I can say in a particular place, the risk of slipping and suffering injuries is 5 per day. Slipping and suffering serious injuries are 2 per day. Slipping and suffering very serious injuries leading into hospitalization, we could say once a month. So that is how the risk is being explained. Risk always been explained with the frequency and the consequence. Now you can see here, this is an effect. Then comes exposure. Exposure means the amount of the hazard to which a person has been exposed. Say as an example, you are working in a construction site. A lot of cranes are working and they are lifting heavy objects. There may be people who are supposed to work underneath that lifted load for a longer time comparing to other people. As an example, a rigger. Rigger is the one who's tying the load to the jib of the crane while being lifted. So he's supposed to have a leading code and he navigate the load while it is being lifted and transferred. So exposure of a rigger to an elevated object is much higher than a person standing outside. So that is the exposure. So exposure is directly related with the job or the task the person is been performing. Now here you can see some workers are working outside. It's a construction site again. Now these people are exposed to hot sun on continuous basis throughout their work day. But a person who's working inside the office, their exposure to this undesirable condition is very low. Effect. Effect is impact on people, asset, environment or reputation if a hazard is released directly or by chain of events. Now releasing of the hazard, don't worry for the time being, but I explain what the hazard is. We'll say if a person is get exposed to the hazard to understanding it in an easier manner. Now as an example, if you get exposed to the sun, what will happen to you? So in general, when a person get exposed to hot sun, definitely he's going to have some health effects. So this is a very generic term when it say effect. But if you are going to see what happens to each and every individual or specific focal group, we call it consequence. Why we call it consequence? Consequence may be changing from person to person and organization to organization. I'll quote a very easy to understand example. Now, everyone in this country got exposed to shutdown due to COVID issue. Transport industry was shut down, businesses were shut down, and curfew was declared. So everyone got exposed to 2 months of isolation. When I say isolation, isolation from the work. Effect of that one is negative to everybody. Why? They are not working. Nothing is happening. But the consequence of Big companies may be very small, whereas the consequence for a smaller business is going to be tremendous. So that is what consequence means. Now here in this example, the consequence of working in hot sun are sunburn or rashes. But this is not going to happen to everybody. It depends from person to person. Some may walk away even without any consequence also, though the effect was there. Then the likelihood, chance of the negative effect. Now, as I discussed earlier, the country was shut down for 2 months. The businesses were suffering. The likelihood of a business with smaller capital to suffer may be very, very high, while the likelihood of a business with larger capital to survive is very high. So this is what likelihood means. Then the recovery measure. The recovery measures are technical, operational, organizational measures that limit the chain of consequence arising from the top event. Now, the top event is the last thing that can happen. Now, we'll take the same example. The country was shut down, businesses are suffering. Where the recovery measure? I heard on TV the government is announcing you need not to pay your taxes right now. You need not to go and get your licenses done right now. And the government is distributing dry rations sometimes and maybe 5,000 rupees grant. All these things are recovery measures. Why? It is trying to limit the damage. It is trying to reduce the consequences of the event. That is what recovery measures are. Now we are coming to hemp. Remember, I have been talking about this one, HSCMS. It stands for Health, Safety, Environment Management System. This is the total management system of an organization which specifies how the HSC policy is being implemented. So arrangements, organization, and all the things, resources, competency, everything coming in the HSCMS. HEMP stands for Hazard Effect Management Process. Now these are the 4 stages of the HEMP. Identify, assess, control, recover. We'll go one by one. Identify. What are you going to identify? Identify all hazards of your activities. Then you evaluate them and see what kind of impact it can give into your company or organization. Controlling. What is controlling? You are identifying the hazard, you are identifying what kind of risk it can present, and you are trying to control the impact of that one within your business. And then recovery measures. If something goes wrong, despite having controls for the risk, what are you going to do? So these are the 4 stages of HEMP. So let's see in a little bit of more detail. Are people, environment or assets exposed to the potential harm? This is a question what you're supposed to ask in every stage of this assessment. Then what are the causes and consequences? What are the likelihoods? What is the risk and is it ALAP? Now here I am forwarding you another abbreviation. ALAP stands for as low as reasonably practicable. So which means when you bring in a control measure, it should be always ALAP. Don't bring a solution which is not possible to implement. Bring a solution which will reduce the risk to a manageable level. Now say as an example, when you are driving in the road, there is a risk of someone coming onto you and crashing. So what are you going to do? You get a proper driving license with proper training, drive a proper vehicle, and you follow the rules and regulations and maintain your temper and anger. So by doing those things, you can maintain ALAP. You can reduce the risk of a motor vehicle accident as low as reasonably practicable level. That's what ALAP means. Then comes control. Now the controlling is, can the causes be eliminated? What is the risk? Why it is happening? Identify that and try and see whether you can control that. What controls are needed and how effective those controls are. I will quote a different kind of an example for this one because actually I experienced this during one of my audits of a facility. They are trying to control rodents and rats inside the warehouse. That was their risk. Why? They come and damage all the goods stored inside. So they have bought all kind of controls, but still the rats are inside. Actually, what you should identify is, can the cause be eliminated? Rats are not breeding inside the warehouse. They are coming from outside. So it's a matter of plugging 2-3 openings. The problem was gone. So in the same manner, you have to identify the cause of the problem, not the problem itself. If you identify the cause, you can control it very well. Then the recover. Can the potential consequence or effects be mitigated? Now, which means if there is a damage, can you limit the damage? And how we are going to bring the business back to the normal level? That is what the recovery measures means. The recovery measures what we are having in our hands, are they big enough or sufficient enough to ensure that it will bring our business back at any given time? Those are the recovery measures. Anyway, don't worry about this magnitude of these things right now. We are going to go through a practical example and then you will understand it much better. Now we are coming into steps in risk control. What are the steps? First, we have to understand why we do this. I told you a hemp could be done for various reasons. We have to deliver the requirements specified in our reasons. So before doing anything, we have to understand why we do this. Now, for the discussion's sake, because you are going to do this, I am quoting this example right now. Why we are doing this now? We have taken up a new business and we want to see whether this business is going to succeed in our hands without causing any problems. So we are doing this exercise to identify the risk of a new business. But remember, now we are going to start a new business. Our HSE policy statement comes. Now you can see here, identify the relevant health and safety, environmental welfare issues relating to the organization's activities. Now we are going to start a new business. There will be activities. Now here in the statement of intent, our CEO has stated that we have to identify all the related issues. Then a commitment to risk assessment, emergency procedures, health surveillance and employment of competent persons. Unless you identify what kind of problems it's going to cause, we will never know what kind of situations we are going to face, what kind of emergencies we are going to face, and what kind of competencies and equipment we should have to manage this issue. Once it comes to arrangements, again, this is part of the HSE policy. It says for evaluating and managing risk arising from workplace hazardous substances, activities, fire, etc. We are legally bound to do this. Now we are going to take over a new business. In our corporate HSE policy under arrangements, it has said we have to have arrangements in place for evaluating and managing risk arising from the workplace hazardous substances, activities, fire, etc. Also it says in arrangements very specifically, asset integrity management. You can't say the roof collapsed and one person died. No, we have to have asset integrity management system. Procedures and work instructions. We have to tell workers what to do, how. Consequence management, here I have made it little gray because it is not directly connected with the health and safety management system. Then emergency response planning and the organization to support. So once you have all these requirements in place, you are complementing the specific requirements mentioned in the HSE policy. Now we are going to come back to the risk control measures. How we are going to do the risk control measure? What is our system? We are doing an exercise called hazard identification to identify all the hazards in our business. Then we have to understand how hazards cause incidents. What kind of hazard is there? What kind of damage it's going to do to us? So to understand this, you have to understand what is the hazard, what is the target, what is the effect. In a very simple manner, it's mentioned like this. Hazard, target, event or effect, both are the same. I will explain you this deeper with some examples. Hazard is the potential to cause harm. We learned that earlier. Target is the one which is getting caught to that effect. In generally, hazards are staying in isolation, but the hazard can become dangerous if it gets released. What is released in the hazard is the threat. Now I've quote another very simple example. Maybe you all are having ceiling fans. Now the ceiling fan is hanging on the ceiling. It has been connected to the ceiling by a small metal hook. As long as the metal hook is proper, ceiling fan is going to hang there. But this has the potential to cause harm. The fan can come and land on our head at any given time. That is because of the gravity. So remember, one very common hazard is overhead objects. Any object above your head and can come and crash at any given time. But how this fan is going to come down? The fan is going to come down only if the bolt or the hook on which the fan is being connected fails. So what is the threat? Threat is the failure of the bolt or the hook. What is making the bolt or hook to fail? It's a structural integrity issue. So remember, you have to understand, when you are dealing with hazards and targets, hazard is getting released because of threats. We are going to study all these things in step-by-step guidance, so don't worry about it much for the time being. So remember, threat releases the hazard irrespective of the target. Why I say irrespective of the target is the failure of the hook bolt which is holding the fan can fail at any given time, sitting under the fan or not. It can happen at any time. But unfortunately, if a person is sitting under that, that becomes an event. Why? Someone is going to suffer. Hazard get released. The target is the person who's going to become a victim. It come and land, the fan comes and lands on the head. So there is a consequence. Consequence is the effect. Now let's see how it happens. You can see here, this is another different example, a toppling of a vehicle due to running off the road, hitting the shoulder at the edge of the road. You can see here, shoulder of the road. It's nearly about 6-7 inches higher. The vehicle comes and hit the shoulder of the road and the vehicle toppled. Hazard is the shoulder of the road. Target is the vehicle's or the vehicle's stability actually. What is the event? Rollover of the vehicle. Exact consequence are going to come afterwards. Event or the effect is toppling of the vehicle. So let's see how we are going to manage it now. Now we are going to do a hazard identification. The statement, identify the relevant health, safety and environmental issues relating to the organization's activities. We have made this statement via in our HSE policy. So this is what we are going to do. Identify all relevant health and safety environmental issues relating to organization's activity. In the arrangement section, we have specified control of hazardous substances, manual handling, noise, etc. We have to ensure that it is been done. Now you can see here in the hazard identification, control of hazardous substances. Hazardous substance is a hazard. Improper manual handling is a hazard. Noise, vibration, etc. all those things are hazards. Now here what I am going to do is, I am going to show how our health and safety policy statement and the arrangements are going to support our hazard identification exercise. Then comes health and safety inspection, audit procedures and asset integrity management, that is for threat control. Now say you are having hazards in one place. I told you it is the threat that releases the hazard. But if you are doing your health and safety inspection, audit procedures, asset integrity management, you are controlling your threats. As long as you control your threats, hazards are going to be in isolation without causing any harm. Then you can see here, towards the right hand side, loss of control. There's a thing called target control, then the consequence and the effect. The target control, the target is the one who's getting caught to the hazard. Consequence, once the hazard come onto the target, there will be consequences. Let's see how it is going to take place. So the target control is, here we are talking about people, procedure and work instructions. That is how we are controlling the target. We are asking people how to perform a risky job. We are setting procedures for that. Then comes the recovery measures. Emergency procedures, first aid, accident and illness reporting and instigating procedure. This is coming from arrangements again. How we are going to do it? You can say here, mitigation. Mitigation is emergency procedures and first aids. Then comes accident and illness reporting and investigation procedure as a recovery measure. Now the recovery is, remember, bringing business back. That is recovery measure. Employees' health and safety responsibilities. People have responsibilities. This is also specified in our arrangements. Now you can see here how the health and safety policy and the statement is embedded into hazard identification. Now for the easiness of understanding, I am going to show you with examples how it is be done from the beginning. I ask you all to define your business blocks and key activities for each of them. So this is an example which I have quoted you earlier. These are the business blocks. In this business block, we identify activities. Then we evaluated them into tasks. Within this task, what kind of risk is available. Unloading from the ship. What are the risks? Freight falling from above. Entrapment, slips, trips and falls. Loading and transportation. The risk of cargo falling, entrapment, injuries, motor vehicle accidents during unloading, cargo falling, entrapment, injuries, stack failures. So these are the places where things will go wrong. Now we will bring this into our hazard in a different manner. Just to clear everything what we have discussed earlier, I am going to quote a different kind of example this time, so you will understand it better without any confusion. What are we going to do here? You can see here we are talking about an activity of changing roof sheets. Now you can see there is a building. We have been assigned to change the roof sheets. To do the roof sheet, we have to perform the task of getting onto the roof. We can't do it from the ground level. So remember, the activity is changing roof sheets. The task is to get onto the roof. This is the first task. So after that, what could happen? Maybe removing of all the sheets and loading them onto a crane or a jib or something like that and taking them down. The first task is to get onto the roof. Now here I am doing this. This is an example of hazard identification exercise. Now you can refer to the piece of paper, the attachment which I have sent. Please download it and have a look at it and compare what I am telling against that from this time onwards. So what is the activity block? Changing of the roof sheets is a maintenance activity. The activity block is that. The first one is the roof maintenance. What is the task? Get onto the roof using a man lift. For you to get onto the roof using mechanical equipment, what are the hazards? Working in man lift is working at height. So when you are working at height, what is the problem? If there's any failure of the equipment or any other reason, you can come crashing onto the ground. Then also you can see here there are some electrical wires. So there is a possibility of electrocution also. Now all these things, falling from this height and electrocution, it can happen only if the threat comes in and releases the hazard. So what are the threats? If the equipment, as I mentioned earlier, is not in proper shape, it can release the hazard and you will crash. So how you are controlling the threat? Purchasing or having a suitable equipment. And the second threat control measure is maintenance schedule. You're supposed to maintain this equipment properly. Then for this particular task, you can see electrical wires are there as the hazard. What is the threat control? Repositioning the equipment from a different angle maybe, or if it is not possible, isolation of the electrical wire, electrical supply. So by doing that, you can control the hazard. So this is the first stage of any risk management policy or procedure. Why? First we have to remove the hazard. If you can remove this hazard, there's no problem. But can you remove the hazard every time? No. For you to remove the roof, remove the sheets of the roof, you have to get onto the roof. So working at height is a must. But can you remove the hazard of electrical wires? Wires may not be, but you can remove the electricity from there. How? You do the isolation. What is isolation? You switch off the main switch. If it is a government or any other supply line, inform the authorities. If it is not possible, you go for the repositioning. So by doing so, you can control the hazard or at least the threats. Then the target. What is the target? Here the worker. You can see there is a worker on top of it. Assume it's you. Working procedures. So the working procedures tell the operator how to manage the bucket, how to move it without toppling. Then the training and competency. He should be trained enough to handle this equipment. He should be competent. Then only he can perform the task beautifully. Then about the electrical wires, the workers has to be aware of the threat from electricity. So the working procedures, PTW stands for permit to work. This permit to work means not everyone is permitted to perform this kind of activities. It is only for selected, competent and confident people who can do this job. Okay. Then comes training and competency, then selection of the equipment. Even when he identified, the moment he identified that there is a risk of electricity, he has to change the type of equipment what he is dealing with. Why? The wrong equipment can create a lot of problems. The isolation may not be possible. you are going to work near energized electrical lines. At this time, you are going to have a lot of difficulties. Then there is another possibility, separation. What is separation? See if you can separate your basket from the electrical lines. If you do that, you are separating the target from the hazard of electricity. Consequence, if something goes wrong, your hazard is there, you try to control the threat, you try to control the target, both are failing, then there may be a consequence. Falling from height, that is the consequence. Or electrocution, that is the consequence. Falling from height, what can happen? What is the worst case scenario? Serious health effect or death. Then from the company's point of view, loss of reputation. Then from the electrocution, again you can have serious health effect or death and loss of reputation for the business organization. So this is what effect means. We will look at the other side of the thing. After the hazard releases, after the hazard creates problems, how we are going to manage it. So the effect is serious health effect or death, loss of reputation for the electricity as well as for working at height. Now what is mitigation? Mitigation is limiting the damage. How you can limit the damage? Supervision from outside. While this person is working, a supervisor stands away and he is monitoring his activities, and the moment he is getting closer to dangerous levels, the supervisor can shout and say, stop it. So that is a mitigation. Then first aid kits and teams. By any chance, if the person falls, if you have your first aid kits and first aid teams, it can minimize the damage. Person has already fallen, he's on ground, but if the first aid is available right now, he's not going to die. To some extent, you can be sure of that. Then personal protective equipment. If the person is wearing any protective equipment, even if he falls, even if he gets electrocuted, the impact is going to be minimized. Then you can also have a fall arrestor. What is fall arrestor? It's going to minimize the height it's going to fall. Fall arrestor can be anchored either onto the roof of the building or to the man basket. It is always better to anchor it to a permanent place, that is the roof. So before he starts walking around the roof, he has to anchor himself after wearing a harness. So that is mitigation. So remember, mitigation is not going to prevent you from suffering any injuries. Incident will happen, but the repercussions will be minimized. That is mitigation. Then there is another component for you to assess the risk. What is risk and how we are going to manage it? Let's study on that one. So remember, the risk is how much of damage you are going to suffer and what is the likelihood. For you to assess that one, there is a separate tool called RAM, Risk Assessment Matrix. For you to complete that component, you have to study what the proper risk assessment is going to be. Now you can see here, when we were doing the strategic planning risk assessment, we used a different kind of a risk assessment matrix. Now here we are using a different one. Try and understand the difference between the one which is used for strategic decisions and here for operational safety management. Please go through this carefully. You can see here very easily, you can identify onto the left hand side, it is the severity for people, environment, reputation and assets. Onto the right hand side, it is likelihood. So imagine in your organization, if there are 4 to 5 deaths every year, severity, you go to the very last, that is 5. Then 5P. Then you come to the right hand side and define the likelihood. So multiple fatalities, it is happening in your organization more than once per year. If it is happening like that, it is going to be P5E. People, severity 5, likelihood is E, that is more than once per year. So assume a situation where more than 3 fatalities happen only once per year in your organization. Then it is going to be people 5D. So 5E, 5D and even 5C falling into the red area. So in the same manner what we discussed earlier, red area is no-go. You can't have any activities in this manner. So imagine a situation where you are suffering major injuries once a year. So major injury is coming for people. Major injury severity is 3. So it is P3. Then I mentioned it's happened in the organization once per year. Then what will happen? Has happened in the organization or more than once per year in the industry. So that is C. Has happened at the location or more than once per year in the organization. That is D. Now I told you it has happened once a year like. So your risk is going to be major injury P3C. So P3C is a medium risk activity. Okay. So that is how you are referring to the risk assessment metrics. And when you are deciding about environment, reputation and assets related risk, how you are going to measure it. Remember, severity 1 means you can manage independently. What is independently? It is a localized risk. You need special support. Let it be related to asset, let it be related to reputation, let it be related to environment. You have to seek support of the specialized people within the organization. Now say as an example, if you hurt your finger, if the injury is very small, you can attend it to by yourself. So it is managing independently. Internal specialist support. The severity is little bit more, you ask for the first aid team to come. That is internal support. Say you lost your wallet. If you have little bit of money in a different place, you can manage it independently. You don't have any money left with you, so you have to ask from somebody else. So that is level 2. The organization is also the same. Then level 3 means externally identified support. A fire has taken place. You can put down the fire by yourself, little bit of damage. So that is level 1. Internally specialized support means you are calling your emergency response teams to come. Internal. So they come and start throwing water and directing water hoses onto that one. That is level 2. You can't control the fire. You call external firefighters to come. That is level 3. Then comes level 4. Unidentified external support. Your CEO will shout and say, I don't know what you want to do. Please get somebody to control this fire. That is level 4. Why? Even the firefighters can't handle it. It may be your localized fire brigade in your local area. In that case, you can call the Central Firefighting Department from Colombo to come, Air Force to come and drop water from sky. So those are the external support. You are in crisis situation. Even if you control this situation, you are not in good shape from that time onwards. Then comes level 5. Level 5 is unable to recover. So if you end up in a level 5 situation, it is very, very rare that you will start the business in the same manner what you have been performing earlier. So remember these ratings be used in our future endeavors. Be aware of how to use this. And if you can use this properly, you can manage any risk, anytime, under any circumstances. Let's go back to our original calculation now. Now you can see here, we discussed about the effect, what is going to happen. Now we discussed about the mitigation measures. Now is the opportunity to talk about the risk. Now see, you can see here, I have mentioned the people as 4C, P4C. What is P4C? Permanent total disability or up to 3 fatalities. C means it has happened in the organization no more than once per year in the industry. So which means in our company this has happened once. Now the person is performing the same job, which means this is a medium risk activity. Why it is medium? It is falling into the yellow zone. And even on the second risk, electrocution, again it is 4C, which means severity 4 for people is permanent total disability or up to 3 fatalities. It has happened in our organization once, so it is falling under P4C. This is how risk is being measured. Then recovery measure. How we are going to recover? So remember there is a difference between the mitigation and recovery. Mitigation is to limit the damage. Recovery measures is to BAU, business as usual or near. Your plan should be to bring back the business. Now, as an example, I can show some instances where the fires has taken place. I mentioned about the Arpichel water tank factory. After the incident, nothing left. No business as usual for nearly 1.5 years, which means they don't have a recovery plan. So the recovery measures is the rescue plan or equipment, external emergency responsive support, which can help to come back to your business activities as usual as early as possible. Then here I have mentioned another one, PPE reactive, personal protective equipment. Reactive means it activates or it gives you the service when something goes wrong. As an example, the helmet. Helmet is a reactive personal protective equipment. Why? You are wearing the helmet, which is of no use if something is not going to fall onto your head. It gives the service only when something falls onto your head, which means it's reactive. So if you are wearing a helmet, if something falls onto your head, dung, the noise, you move away, remove the helmet, you can see that there is a dent on your helmet, but you can go back to your work. So that is a recovery measure which brings you back to life without any problem. Imagine you were not wearing the helmet, then what will happen? The thing that fall onto your head will puncture through your head and you will end up in the hospital if you are not going to die. So the mitigation measure is something different. Recovery measure is even a more effective mitigation. Then comes the residual risk. So remember, this residual risk is what is expected in the organization. If your organization is going to maintain very low risk level, you can't have medium risk hovering around you. So what you're supposed to do is bring back some other suggestions, improve the system, and have a plan to reduce the risk and hand over the responsibility of doing that to a particular person. That is what the responsible person means, right? Okay, now we have gone through the hemp process completely. Maybe you can recall I told you at the very beginning, once you complete this one, you are equally completing the work procedures as well as recovery and rescue measures also. So the emergency response is actually falling into recovery measures. Then your work procedures are into mitigatory measures. So the mitigation, whatever you do there is your work procedures, and whatever you do to recover or rescue in the emergency situation, that those are the emergency response and the rescue measures. So while you are completing the hemp, you have effectively developed the basis for the work procedures and the basic for the emergency response planning. So what kind of controls you are going to bring in? If anything falls into red area, you can't do this work. Honestly, you have to think of bringing it to at least the medium risk level. You have to have a lot of controls. Now each and every control should be directly assessed against the activity. Then you might get low risk. Low risk you can run with generic procedures, give the general competencies so the people can handle low risk activities without any issue. Medium risk. For the medium risk, you have to have procedures, you have to allocate responsibilities, the performance has to be monitored, minimum competencies should be established. When you all submitted your last assignment, I saw so much of high risk activities identified, but still all the CEOs were so happy to go ahead with the operation. But this time you can't do that. Remember, any hazard in red area, you have to bring in to at least the medium level. All medium levels should be minimized to lower level. It's a requirement. Recovery measures. What are recovery measures? Recovery measures are to recover from the consequence of the release of the hazard. Like what? Emergency response plan. This is a recovery measure. Fire plan. It's a recovery measure. Crisis plan. It's a recovery measure. Then mitigation measures. Mitigation measures is to minimize the impact. The emergency response plan also could be a mitigation measure also. Why? If the emergency response plan includes the training where the people are getting to know how to handle the fire extinguishers, it can mitigate the damage. Fire plan, how the alarm goes, that will help you to identify the hazard at the earlier stages of its release and bring in control as early as possible. Then very uncommon examples, anti-lock brake system of your vehicle. You apply the brake, the vehicle is going to skid, anti-lock brake system will come and control the vehicle. So that also mitigation measure. Your airbag. You have crashed your car, your head is coming onto the steering wheel or the dashboard, you are about to suffer serious injuries, airbag will come and save your face at least to 50% level. Not that you are going to walk out without any injury or any impact. Definitely there will be injuries, but the injuries will be minimized. Then the firefighting system, automated ones such as sprinklers. The sprinklers will get activated only when there is a fire. So the fire has already taken place, but the sprinkler will minimize the damage. So that is a mitigation measure. Right, now we are recapping the terms what we used in this exercise. Hazard. Hazard is the potential to cause harm. I told you that earlier. Now we are going to talk about some examples. Hydrocarbon. Hydrocarbon is petrol, diesel, LPG, all those things are hydrocarbon which are highly combustible. Elevated objects. Anything hanging on top of you. Even if you go on top of a building, you are an elevated object. Toxic substances, poisonous stuff. Electrical energy, noise, then working at height, hazardous equipment, temperature, radiation, stronger lights, vibrations, all these things are hazards. Why? All these things has the potential to cause harm. But it can't cause harm. There should be two reasons. First requirement is the hazard has to be released, then there should be a target. Unless the hazard is being released or unless there is a target, there's no problem. So this is what the threats means. What is the threat? Threat is the one which is releasing the hazard. In general, if you consider a fuel storage tank, say massive diesel tank, the containment is what is inside the tank. How will it come out? The corrosion can damage the tank and take the diesel or petrol storage start to leak. Fatigue. What is fatigue? Fatigue is the stress. What is stress? When you store fuel, whether it's in liquid form or gaseous form for a longer time, it is exerting a lot of pressure on the structure. That is fatigue. Then external impact. A vehicle coming and crashing onto that one. So it will rupture the tank surface and start leaking. High temperature. Maybe external fire. Maybe someone is purposely setting it on fire. Then excessive pressure inside the tank. All these things are threats and it will release the containment. So possible cause that will potentially release the hazard is a threat like high temperature, corrosion. There are biological threats like bacteria, marine growth, radiation, then the fatigue, electrical high voltage, then the poor visibility, flooding, severe storm, earthquake. All these things can release the hazard. Anything which has the potential to release the hazard is being considered as a threat. Then there's a thing called barrier. What is barrier? Barrier is a control actually. Control measures put in place to prevent releasing a hazard. Now as an example, if corrosion is a threat for the fuel storage tank to release the hazardous diesel, your control measures is maintenance. So that proper maintenance is a barrier. Then administrative controls like warning signs, training, drills, then the procedural things. Now small amount of inventories, if you are storing 10,000 gallons of petrol in your facility, your exposure is very high. But if you store only 100 liters of petrol in your store, your damage is going to be very little. So these are few examples of barriers. This is event or the effect. Now you can see all these things are coming together. Hazard is chemicals. Threat is excessive pressure. When the excessive pressure applies on the storage tank, it will start leaking. So the loss of containment of leakage is known as either event, effect. So these are some few examples of release of the hazard and what is the event. Loss of containment, something starts to leak. Structural damage, something is falling. Drop objects, something which has been mounted on top is coming and landing on the ground. Loss of control, a person is driving a crane or vehicle, he's losing control over the thing. Electrical shock, the electricity is supposed to stay within the conductors, it is getting damaged and someone receiving the electrical shock. Falls to the same level. While you are walking down, you trip and fall to the same level. Falls to the lower level. You are working on a roof and falling to the ground. That is falling to the lower level. Oxygen deficiency. You're supposed to have enough oxygen to breathe, but you're walking into an environment where there's no oxygen. Then loss of separation. You have a water tank with a very well controlled valve. So you separate the water from the outside environment through a valve. The valve breaks. Loss of separation. Then diesel contamination issue. Diesel is supposed to stay within the pipelines, but the separation failed and it started to leak out. Vehicle accidents, you all have heard many more. Some of the examples of top events, loss of containment, pipeline or cylinder leakage, structural failure, electrical shock, vehicle collision. All these things are events. With that, we have come to the end of our session for the day, but definitely you are going to have some work. Individual activity, I have highlighted it in red. Complete a HEMP for 3 business activities with 3 tasks each within your work scope. So you have to identify 3 activities and 3 tasks per activity. So you are going to end up with 9 tasks of your own scope. So within this 9 tasks, they should contain minimum of 3 hazards per task. So identify 9 tasks and 3 hazards per task. So 9 into 3 is 21. So this is going to be little bit more for your day-to-day schedule, but please bear in your mind 20% marks of this contribute to your final assignment score. So please don't take it lightly. This is an opportunity for you to score some marks because I have allowed you enough time to do this one. You have 1 week from today, so please pay your attention. Please refer to the video and do a thorough job. Remember, don't complete it halfway and send it to me for correction. I am not going to do this. This is an exam. This is an official assignment, so no assistance given. But if you have any question about what is this, how to do this, without asking for any examples, without asking me to explain how it's to be done on your assignment, the help is available. You can't ask questions specifically to your assignment, but in broad basic terms, you can ask questions and you can get things clarified. But for this, remember the deadline is 23rd May 2020. I have to have before that. If you want, I can set the time limit also 20 hours. 20 is 8 p.m. So remember the deadline is 8 p.m. 23rd May 2020. You can ask questions before that. Any response after 8 p.m. of 23rd May 2020 will get 0 marks. I am very firm on that one because I have given you ample opportunity. Support is always available. You can ask questions. Those who didn't ask questions, I'm going to feel very sorry for them only and no marks. Okay, right. So that is the end of the session, and with this we are ending our module 4. This is the risk management module. Remember, this is the most difficult module to understand, and please get it from me. If you can do this properly in very proper way, a job opportunity for you is guaranteed. Once you complete this program, if you are a person who understands risk and know how to manage it, definitely you're going to have some good job opportunities. So with that, we are ending our session today. Thank you so much. Please remember, you can WhatsApp me on this number. I may not answer calls after the allocated time for that day, but definitely you can send a message. If there's any requirement for me to come back, I will. And remember, this is not a group activity. This is an individual activity. Each and every individual has to submit their response. But you can discuss it as a group. There's no problem with that. But your assignments are individual. This is going to carry 20% of your final assignment. Thank you and good luck.